Welcome back, everybody, to our series on one-dimensional man. We're back again with Dr. Jim Madden. Last time we talked through the introduction, made some preliminary marks, and our objective today is to summarize Chapter 1, continue, trying to facilitate some conversation, make some commentary, answer some questions, have a good freaky time. Not too freaky because it's not Freaky Friday yet. That's coming. That's
tomorrow's gonna get weird,
dude. Yeah, tomorrow we have a real Freaky Friday. So make sure you get ready for our QnA because we're gonna cover the philosophy of Ted Nugent because we got something special planned for you guys.
Yeah, and or at least whether or not it's a philosophy is an interesting question. Like, is there a systematic whole? Right. Is there a set of stable first principles this is based on? I would rather doubt that.
Yeah. One thing I love about our channel so far is it seems we love contrast. We go from Plato to Marcuse to Ted Nugent. All within a single week. So
all within a single week.
Variety, they say, is a spice of life. You're going to get that here, folks. So
consistency being the hobgoblin of little minds.
Indeed. Yeah. What a great quote. Yeah. Gosh, who was that quote? That wasn't Thoreau, was it? Was it?
It's one of the 19th century poets.
It's Emerson. It's Emerson. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Had to re-download that in my brain. Okay. Anyways, yeah, Jim. So why don't you? I don't know. Do you want to re-summarize the introduction and then help us get started with chapter 1 here? Yeah.
Like I do to my students, I always let's refer ourselves back to the table of contents, right?
Good.
And so in the introduction, what do we get? Well, Marcuse is concerned that the revolution was supposed to have happened by now. Right, and it's basically this kind of was motivating not just this book, but all of his work, all of the critical theory school, right?
Yeah.
These sort of new left Marxists that came out of the post-war into the 60s, and they became like the talking points of the counterculture in the 60s and 70s, and then like now their students are like running the academic left today, right?
Yeah.
What's the big thing here? Well, the revolution was supposed to have happened like during the Great Depression.
Right.
That was supposed to be big crash.
We had some prophecies and they did not quite pan out, right?
Didn't come through. Okay. And so then there's this question of like, hey, why didn't it happen? Okay. And the way I read Marcuse is he's saying there's two reasons, right? Like one, we weren't really good empirical social scientists. So we actually have to base this, right, these prophecies on what's happening on the ground. It has to be sensitive to empirically what's changing. Okay?
Yeah.
Two, I think he thinks we didn't really read our Hegel well enough. Right. And we didn't understand the degree to which this movement is going to absorb opposites into each other. Okay.
Right.
And I think the combination he's saying, because we misunderstood the empirical situation, we didn't understand what the new synthesis would be. And so because we had this pie in the sky eschatological Marxism where the revolution just has to happen no matter what, and it's going to be and what the new synthesis will be between the two opposed classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, will be the communist utopia, right?
Yeah.
Well, what happened instead is you got this absorption of opposites together, okay, but not into a communist utopia, but into this new consumer society that we have starting in the 50s into the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s,
right,
and 20%.
That has been enslaving us softly.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really good way to think of it. It's like rather than going to the complete liberated, non-enslaved state that was going to be the communist utopia, we just moved from a hard slavery to a soft slavery.
Yeah,
right. And the capitalist system found a way to absorb its other, right, to absorb the opposition into it. Essentially, how by giving the working class, the revolutionary proletariat for the Marxists,
the Ford Mustang,
right? A Ford Mustang, a color TV, right?
Porn,
trips to Disney World, right? Okay. In our day, the iPhone, right?
Right.
And these things that are seen as like the surface story are seen as the liberation of the social class of the proletariat are actually the tools of domination, right? Because what Marcuse sees these as are sort of like addictions, right? They're getting people hooked on these goods that are not their real good. It's just a good that we can get them into that will serve the status quo.
Right. It'll keep them busy. It'll keep them occupied. It'll be operational, to use one of his terms.
Yeah, that's gonna be big this chapter.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what he wants to do is to diagnose like what has exactly happened here, like why has this become the synthesis, right? Okay,
Yeah.
how does it work? Like, what are the new modes of domination? Okay, whereas it used to be like, do this or you'll starve, right? You'll come and work in this factory. Like, we've wiped out the feudal system, so you have no choice. It's starvation or it's work in the factory.
Right.
Okay, that darn near led to communist revolution globally, and I think it damn near did in the 30s, right? Okay, and so now what happened is he says, well, it wasn't liberation. Rather than like oppressing people by work or starve, it's either work or you won't get these goodies, right? Where we decide for you what the goodies are. I mean, that's the thing this gets us into chapter 1 is where he's saying, like, what's happened here is this isn't freedom, right? It's not that it's the standard. This gets us something we want to talk about.
Yeah.
It's not the standard story that we get from sort of the libertarian right to say, what's happened is we have free market now, in the sense that people are just allowed to make free rational choices about what they want, and the market delivers these, right? What Marcuse is saying is, no, the what's happened is the machine, right? The producers are deciding both what the products are, and they're deciding what our desires are for those products, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a very sophisticated system of manipulation to get us to internally desire these products, right?
Right on. Right. I used to know a band that used to rage against the machine. Now they
rage against the machine.
Now they rage for it. Yeah.
Yeah, they rage for it. And I want to get into that. Okay, right. And so there was a listener who raised a really good question. Like, he said, like, well, I kind of get Marcuse's point, but really, I don't think this is a problem, because what we have now is a lot of free choice, right? Like this system that we have now, let's just choose among this range of products. And Marcuse is saying that's exactly what's not happening, because it's not like you were unmolested by the system in making this choice, that there are very, very sophisticated techniques being used to get you to think of your basic human needs in terms of these products that have nothing to do with really basic human needs, right?
Yeah, or at least the good life as such.
Right? The good life as such.
Yeah.
And like, one of my favorite examples is, so for instance, like we know that if you get like neural pathways excited in the brain at the same time, repeatedly, they'll be associated fairly long term. Okay. And this is like, they are consciously trying to do this, right? So you see the dumb commercial where you have like the scantily clad girl like dancing around with a can of Pepsi, right? And you're like, oh, that's so stupid. They think I'm going to buy Pepsi because they think I can get that girl if I drink Pepsi or something like that, right? And that's just stupid. But that's not the point of it. The point of it is, literally, they know if they get you a little like sexually excited, they get that neural pathway going. When you're seeing the Pepsi image, the next time you see the Pepsi image, you'll get like really low grade self-conscious sexual arousal.
Right. There's that association there, right?
There's an association, and literally, it's literally like there's low grade arousal, right? And so the whole thing is designed to circumvent your rational decision making procedures.
Right.
It's not like you're saying, hey, choose Pepsi or choose Coke, based on your like empirical analysis.
Right?
It's how can we subliminally like manipulate your basic human desires, say in this case for sexuality.
How can we tickle monkey brain, right?
How can we tickle the monkey brain to circumvent the rational part of the brain, right?
You're right.
So you make decisions. Okay, and this is what Marcuse is seeing. Like, this is like this top to bottom, it's how it works, right?
Yeah.
Or like my favorite example is Disneyland, right? Okay, so
Disneyland, by the way, you make your point, but I had a marketing when I was starting as a business owner. I had a tour through Disneyland from one of the most brilliant direct response marketers who spent his whole life studying persuasion. He's like, you want to understand the psychology of persuasion, you come with me to Disneyland, my friends, because if you want to understand how manipulation is just so masterfully conducted, then let's take step by step. And that was a really profound, eye-opening experience. I just wanted to preface whatever you're going to say with that, right? This was the world's top marketer, right? And he's like, we're going to Disneyland to do this conference because there's no better place in the world to figure out what manipulation is all about, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just think of you as a parent, right? And probably less so because you've probably not like allowed Disney to like become the dominant image of your kid's childhood, right?
Yeah, not even close.
Not even close. Yeah, like, and I haven't, partly for this reason. Okay, and so what does Disney do? They young as child as they can get their hands on, they immediately bombard them with images of Disney, which are all commercials, basically, right? For Disney product, Disney merchandise, right? Going to Disney World, spending thousands of dollars to go to Disney World, right? And children are constantly like nagging their parents about this, right? It's designed like, you and I looked at something earlier talking about like the industrial psychologists, which my wife has the PhD in, right? Like know very well like how many nags they need a kid to do to get a parent to take action, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they know what they have to do to a kid to get that number of nags. It's like it's known, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so constantly, like they want kids to have brand identity by the time they're 4 years old. They want your kid mediating their self-awareness, their self-consciousness through the brand by the time they're 4 years old.
Yeah.
They want this to become your kid's identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because you're gonna want to provide your kid with happiness as a parent. It's like deep, basic human need. And now that is mediated through the Disney brand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I make my kid happy? How do I make my kid normal like the other kids? How do I have good memories with my kids? All this stuff that's a basic human need is now associated with Disney, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you choose that? You did not. Like that has been like slowly. No, you did. Like, you chose not to. You chose to turn off the TV, all that stuff. Okay, but no, like the system is not built around free choice. The system is built around manipulation.
Yeah. Very good. Let's quickly draw another distinction that I think is helpful so people don't get the wrong impression either of us or the project. And that is a distinction that you brought up in our private conversation between the neo-Marxist critique and the neo-Marxist project. So let me just disclose my allegiances here and now, which is going to surprise nobody. I have like zero sympathies for the neo-Marxist project, right? The modern day neo-Marxist project, all the wokeism, the critical race theory, all this. I think it is a malignant evil. I think it deserves to be battled, fought, destroyed, annihilated. I have no sympathies.
If there was something more than that we could do, I would say let's do that.
I have no sympathies for socialism or communism, any of that crap, right? I think it's all vile, evil. All that, right? So, I mean, I'll just put my allegiances on again, this should surprise nobody, right? However, we are, again, trying to do good philosophy. And there's a difference between the neo-Marxist project and the neo-Marxist critique. And when you do good philosophy, you read the damn book, Jim's Slogan, which I just wrote a blog on, by the way.
I love that,
Yeah. I'll link that into Substack. And there's a couple other things you have to do if you're just trying to do good philosophy is you have to try and understand the author on their terms, not on your terms or your presuppositions or the terms of commentators or even prior thinkers, right? So you can't try and understand Marcuse on Marx's terms because he's not Marx. He's different than Marx. You have to understand the author on their terms, and you can't do that unless you engage with the damn book, right?
And I would even say you can't even engage the author with in terms of what his conclusion's going to be.
That's right. Yeah. So
we know where Marcuse is going to come out on this, right?
Yeah, and we're just bracketing that and saying and this leads us to distinction between the project and the critique, because so far we're looking at the critique and we're actually saying, well, if we're being fair, there's actually not a whole lot that we need to or even should disagree with in this initial critique, as long as we make, as philosophers are called to do, the right distinctions. And one of those distinctions is, I guess, sort of the you brought up the libertarian right is, again, like if you were to ask Pat Flynn, like, look, I've got my sparkly water in my Packers mug, right? Would I much rather live in a country where I have access to these cheap goods than where I might be, brought into a gulag or die of famine? Yeah, of course. Of course. Like that's a no-brainer. 100%.
And in the chapter, Marcuse actually says very explicitly, this works because the lifestyle this affords us is a good lifestyle. Right. He said it works because it does provide us with a very good lifestyle and a very good standard of living. He's not doubting that. Right.
So we can acknowledge that, and we can still say there are things that are really worth criticizing about the system as a whole and how it is in many ways contrary to the actual good life. It doesn't mean it might not even mean that we want to get rid of the system. It could be the case that this is just the best we could do.
Yeah.
That could be the case, right?
But we should be aware of even if the best system we can have is an oppressive system, right? Like we're always choosing with degrees of oppression, which I think Plato would say here in the cave we will be.
Right. And we should be aware that it's still
aware of system. Yeah, we should be aware of where the oppressions are. And I do think this idea that I think he's right on this, the idea that we are constantly being asked to mediate our lives through product.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Like our own self-conception, right, of ourselves is in terms of branding, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we're never able to like have legitimate self-discovery because what we are is like being given, like being told, we're being told you can choose from these 3 or 4 selves you can be. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And we're going to like the person who could come up with the best, soma drug to get you to want to be that is the one who's going to win. And that's the self you'll be.
Yeah.
Right?
I would love to do Huxley at some point.
Yeah. No, we should definitely. Yeah.
Because I always liked Huxley even a little bit more than Orwell for the spooky, dystopian stuff.
Who got it right? Who actually got the prediction right? Orwell?
I think it was Huxley, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The Island is such a good book from him. I mean, most people think of it came after, so it was a little bit later, but it was really good.
My kid's been reading Huxley in the barracks, right? So that's like fitting, right?
Yeah.
Right?
That's super
right.
good. Yeah.
And
so anyways,
yeah. And so the chapter 1, new forms of social control, and basically what Marcuse argues is that the new forms of social control are constantly being manipulated to mediate our identities through the identities given to us by commercialism,
right?
By like marketing media, right? Okay, and I find that kind of hard to resist, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then really what you get in the chapter is just your reiterations of that, and he talks about how it's always tied to information technology, media technology. Like he has in mind TV, radio,
just technological capitalism.
Capitalism, and so you can see like now, like imagine if this guy had seen the internet. Imagine if he had seen all these other things, right? Where we we carry around we've all been tricked, right, into thinking like the only way to satisfy ourselves is to carry around this device that is essentially marketing things to us and tracking us for marketing purposes.
Yeah, right? and people like really get this, like independently, of course, of this. In fact, I just saw a friend of the show, Matt Fradd. He's doing a little challenge where he's asking people to just smash their iPhone, right?
Yeah.
Now, why would he do that? Because he realizes this thing like holds people hostage.
Yes.
Against their true good, and that's a really tempting thing. Yeah. I almost joined him on that, but then I had to check Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I had to log on and do a podcast. Yeah. So please, viewers of Philosophy for the People, don't do this, right? But and so I mean, and I'm not necessarily saying smash your phone, right? Okay, but what I am saying is like, look, somebody decided the cell phone was going to be the thing. Like there probably were dozens of other technologies that could have been the thing, right? Yeah. And someone decided the cell phone, right? So now you get to choose among cell phone options, right? But why was that the original choice? Like whose interest was that made in? Do you know what I mean? Or like think of all the things that we see these like all these technological innovations, and then we're given a choice among them, but we have no idea what other things could have been done, right? But weren't done because they served someone else's interests. Do you see my point, right?
Yeah.
Right. And this is like one of the things that comes over and over again in this chapter is like you feel like you're making a choice, but you're really not, because the list of things to choose from is prescribed by the machine. Right.
Your choices are really already selected for you under the guise of actual choice.
And then you can be like Pat and Jim and say, we're just not going to participate. Right. We're not going to do Disney. We're not going to do all this. Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to go listen to Ted Nugent.
You're going to listen to Ted Nugent. Right. Yeah.
Because then I know I've escaped from the machine.
I'm going to listen to Government Mule, man. Right. But the thing is though there's going to be a constant attempt to circumvent that, right? To reach you somehow, and reaching you not by saying, hey, consider the syllogism I'm making for my product, right? It's no, how can I tap into your subliminal level of thinking, not thinking,
Right.
of feeling, and mediate that through this project to get you to think you want this.
Right, because the capitalist system it actually is like a testament to its incredible efficiency, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It is like a haunting efficiency, and you see this now with the rise of wokeism in corporations, right? Like everything that like you would think that wokeism was about would be like anti corporatism, right? And what have the corporations done?
yeah.
They've just taken it in, assimilated it, and then sold it back to the people.
Yes,
That's amazing.
Yes.
That's
It's amazing. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, like the level. I actually think Marcuse himself, although he's like trying to stay ahead in this 3D chess game against capitalism, right?
It is a 3D chess game.
Yeah,
right?
but it went like 4D on him,
It
right?
did,
Because
yeah.
like his very version of like critique has become now it sold out to the corporation.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And you're like, that is a testament to a market-based system, because what do markets do? They just respond to demands, right?
Yes.
And markets are efficient. And if people start demanding anti-racism and all this stuff, like market's going to respond to that, right?
Okay,
they do. So I guess that's kind of the question is, and you'll probably let me know if this is getting too far ahead, but I wonder how, because I haven't seen this yet, and maybe he gets to it, right? How like organized top down this is, like, is it a grand conspiracy, or is it just a conspiracy of systems and interests? You see what I'm saying? Because there's an important difference between the two. Yeah.
I think it's just a question of economic incentives.
Right. So it's a conspiracy of interest, but not a grand coordinated conspiracy. Right. Yeah. That's my take. Yeah. Right.
And that's a general Marxist thing, is there never was like this meeting of like, capitalists, behind the scenes, like, how are we going to, there's not like Dr. Evil and
of course. Yeah. Yeah. Because
Right. And I think that always assumes a kind of competence among individual humans that no individual human has.
Yeah, because I mean, like, again, like the funny thing about like grand conspiracy theories is at some level they just are indistinguishable from radically skeptical scenarios.
Yeah.
Right. And there's just so many ways that in terms of just probability they can go wrong. That's why they become at a certain level just utterly unbelievable. Right. But if we're talking about conspiracies of interests, that's obvious, right? That happens all the time. Yeah.
All the time. Okay. So I have two pieces from this chapter that I think.
I had one paragraph, which I sent you.
So I think overall, I think like to the listener, in terms of our pedagogical thing we're trying to do, you get the argument of the chapter, right? Mm-hmm. Is that the reason we have there's no opposition is because we have this one-dimensional society, because, right, we are in fact controlled by our own desires as they have been dictated to us by the very system of control. Right?
It's just a bunch of blissful slaves, he would say.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. Okay. Now, I think there are two things in this chapter that are like hitting, one of which inadvertently on Marcuse's part, why the university, why academia as we find it today is like integral to the very domination they claim to be rejecting. Okay. All right. So do you mind if I run with this a bit?
Oh, please do.
Go for it. Right. So if you go on page 4 of our edition, right. In that full paragraph on page 4.
Yep.
Marcuse says, right. Third line of that paragraph, he says, thus economic freedom would mean freedom from the economy, from being controlled by economic forces and relationships, freedom from the daily struggle for existence, from earning a living. Political freedom would mean liberation of the individual from politics over which they have no effective control. Similarly, intellectual freedom would mean the restoration of individual thought, now absorbed by mass communication and indoctrination, abolition of public opinion altogether with its makers. The unrealistic sound of these propositions is indicative not of their utopian character, but of the strength of the forces which prevent their realization. The most effective and enduring form of warfare against liberation is the implanting of material and intellectual needs that perpetuate obsolete forms of the struggle for existence. Okay. It sounds like what he's talking about liberation there is exactly what Aristotle calls, right, the life of the free person in book 1 of the Metaphysics, right?
Yeah.
It's the person who has like been freed from like the toil for everyday existence so that they can like live this life of leisure dedicated to the truth,
Right.
goody, and beauty.
So they can do philosophy and listen to Ted Nugent.
Do philosophy, listen to Ted Nugent. And, you know what I mean?
Do philosophy, worship God, listen to
worship
Ted Nugent.
God.
That's what Aristotle said is the
Yeah.
good life. Yeah.
Yeah, like real economic freedom would be to like that we've reached a point where we can be free from economic worry, right? Okay, like real political freedom would be like we've reached a level of political stability where we can be free from worry about politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, he's pointing out here, like the system that we have now is like designed to prevent that from happening, right? It's like to keep you ever wanting more goods, more services, needing more goods, more services. So you're ever more directed toward the economic and the political, not the truly humane.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So let's go to Aristotle, right? Because the good life is going to be a life that is the contemplative life, right?
Yes.
Where we become perfected in that which is noblest about us, which is the intellect.
Yeah.
Ultimately extending it to Christianity, that's going to be contemplation with and ultimately union with God, right?
Yes.
And a life that sort of prevents you or frustrates you from getting to that, right? Because it keeps you kind of on your, you know, in the base desires or the appetites, right? Just
constantly having to hustle to like
right.
meet those base desires. Yeah.
Right. That is
and
always
being tricked into thinking those are the most important desires.
And it's keeping you from your, it might be meeting certain basic needs. Obviously it does to some level, right? But it's keeping you from the full flourishing that you're capable of. And if you think of freedom as, right, freedom for excellence rather than just autonomous self-direction, but freedom for excellence, right? Something is most free when it's like most fully itself, right?
And
then
and
in
if
that
you definitely
sense,
don't think of freedom as like making market preference decisions,
right?
Because that's just manipulation. Yeah.
Right. And this is, I mean, but this is a very important distinction of how, like, I guess like people in modern liberal society think of freedom versus how, like, the tradition, perennial philosophy thought about freedom. The freedom was a state of excellence, right?
Yes.
It's a state of true excellence given your nature. That's what freedom was. Serveus Pinkhairs is great on this, right? Freedom for excellence, right?
Yeah.
Kind
McIntyre,
right? McIntyre, for sure.
Yeah.
So once you understand that, if there's a sort of structure or system that's always kind of like causing you to like hit your head against a certain like ceiling, but you need to get above that ceiling to really be an excellent instantiation of humanity, that is worthy of criticism, right?
That is. Yeah.
And that's something that you do not have to be a neo-Marxist. I'm certainly not a neo-Marxist.
No, I'm not
to
either,
make that criticism, right?
Yeah. And I think where I do like kind of go far away with this kind of neo-Marxism, I think there is something structurally about the way we do things that conspires against this, right? That the system is built on precisely a lot, not everybody's in it, but a lot of people not living like this, right? Like McDonald's does thrive on obese people, right?
It does, right? Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're not saying, hey, everybody make a moderate choice about McDonald's. They're constantly pumping, right? You know, like subliminal stuff to get you to go and buy and eat McDonald's, and not saying, but only just enough.
And then they'll put like one little sticker on like your Happy Meal, like, remember to get outside and play today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know what I mean. And of course, I know you could like eat nothing but McDonald's and lose 50 pounds this month, right? I agree, but like that is not what McDonald's is trying to do. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're wrong to do anything like that. I'm just saying
it is broadly logically possible to do that, but is it in any sense practical? No.
Right. Yeah. No. Right. Okay. And as Jim Gaffigan says, it's all McDonald's now, man. Right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm with him a long way on that. But now, if you go to page 6, okay, I think this is on this point where there's a huge ball drop here, a huge ball drop.
Good. Okay. Let's do it. Let's see the ball drop. Mm-hmm.
First paragraph that begins midway on page 6. Okay. In the last analysis, the question of what are true and false needs must be answered by individuals themselves, but only in the last analysis. That is, if and when they are free to give their own answer. Okay, so I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
This is going to be problematic, right?
This is problematic.
And not just from our perspective. This is going to be problematic for him. It's going to be problematic for him. Right. Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be probably a self-defeating claim here. Ultimately for exactly. Our fellow, right?
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. You see it, right?
I do.
So, the whole point of this chapter is there's a difference between your true needs and our false needs, and we have been addicted to false needs, and it's our addiction to false needs is basically why we have to like look to Brandon, right, to help us run our lives. Okay?
Help me, Brandon.
Help me, Brandon. Help me with my needs. Okay, and what Marcuse is saying here is the only way we can distinguish true from false needs is the complete liberation of the individual, right? From everything, right? From everything, right? Like, you know, it's the view that he has here is this sort of this like radically Kantian view of the self, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, you know, the individual is just this free choosing thing, right? And to be free is to think for yourself and to only choose on your own basis, right?
Right.
Okay.
So somehow Brandon got you the UBI you needed, so you've got no economic pressures. Somehow, amazingly, you've rid yourself of all the intellectual pressures that force you in various directions. Somehow you've been freed from the toxicity of consumerism and the addictions that they have implanted into your carnal appetites. So you're like, this is, but you're there, right? Now you're
there,
at
Or the idea is, okay, so I agree with him. We need to like quit allowing like marketing tell us who we are, okay? But he's saying we have to allow everything from telling us who we are. We have to get rid of all mediating structures. We have to get rid of like corporations as mediating structures, but every mediating structure outside of the individual has to go. Okay.
And this is nonsense. Yeah.
This is nonsense because what's left is not an individual. It is just a glop of nothing.
It's a glop of nothing. Yeah. This tells me, which is not uncommon, and I don't think this is uncharitable to say about Marxists, is that they just don't have a good grasp on human nature.
They don't.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the base thing where like I think you and I would depart from these dudes, right?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So what
by the way, we have a cheer for Brandon going in the comment section. So I appreciate
let's
that.
Go. Let's go, Brandon.
Go. Mm-hmm.
And so like what the idea then is we have to take every structure that is external to the individual as like empty self, right? And knock that out, right? So like brand identity's got to go, right? But then like, you know, any kind of affiliation, whether it be church, whether it be family, whether it be sex, these all have to go because they're not chosen by the individual. Like every structure that is not the structure chosen by the individual has to go, right? 100%. And here's where I think the paradox is so then what are you left with? You were left with like this lump of human prime matter, right? That is just
pure potency. There's no way formed, right?
It has no way to make an informed decision about itself, and therefore it's just going to get sucked into the machine.
Of course.
It's just going to become the object of manipulative social control, right?
Yeah.
So this is why like the wokesters who like want to destroy every single external identity to every single individual, right? Whether it's you know, whatever, right? Okay, right down to sex, right?
Right.
What they're doing is they're just providing prime matter for the machines to stamp out human francs.
Yes.
That's what they're doing.
Right.
That's what they're doing.
Your project is self-defeating, my friends.
Your project is self-defeating, right? This is why Nike loves Colin Kaepernick, right? Right? Because like the subconscious economic interests are the same, right?
Yes.
Completely denatured, destructured individuals that will be there just simply to be imprinted with the Nike brand, period. Because they're just prime matter. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. That's a brilliant insight. So this is probably our first major criticism here of Marcuse. I think it's an important one. Yeah. It's a criticism both externally and internally, right? Yeah. So internally, it's going to be bad because it's going to be self-defeating, harmful to his own project. Plus, like, is he really going to want to say that even if you could get his utopia scenario where you get an individual like this, and then they say, okay, now what matters is what they choose. I mean, that is a radical form of relativism. What if they choose that they want the system back? Right? Yeah. Is he really okay with that? Because it sounds like it sounds like on one hand, he's going to say, no, you can't want the system back. But if you do, but why? Why couldn't you want that? Because he's going to say that there's something like objectively bad about that.
I need to choose this thing I am based on what? What criteria? If it's based on no criteria external to you, then it is not objective criteria. And so now you have no choice to make. Yeah. And you are just there to be the victim of the most powerful manipulative influence in your environment.
Yeah.
Right?
So
which is probably going to be like NFL football and pornography and McDonald's.
Yeah. So we have some nonsensical relativism here, like straight up. This does seem like some nonsensical relativism. I like your idea of human prime matter. That's a good analogy. Yeah. And then, of course, from an external critique, I mean, you're just getting human nature wrong. We're social dependent animals. Yep. We need tradition. We would not be human without these types of structures. And now we can argue
is a beast or a god.
Right. And now we can argue about what sorts of structures are better or worse. But to say that we could ever be without these structures and still be human is a nonsense statement. It's like saying that we could be without animality and still be human.
Exactly.
You clearly don't understand human nature at this point. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Right. And so, whereas like I think maybe you and I probably aren't, right? We're all about like bust the system. Okay.
Rage against
it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Serious. Okay. So,
by the way, Tom Morello, I have to mention Tom Morello, who's always been a hack of a guitarist, right? The only thing good about Tom Morello, his guitar work is brutish. It is boring, but fortunately, most of it is short, right?
I can't sustain it.
Guy was in a band called Rage Against the Machine. Now has a like newsletter for the New York Times that he charges people to subscribe for. Dude, you are the machine.
You're the machine.
You idiot. You are literally the machine.
And
right?
even leaving leaving aside his personal sellout, right? Okay, so all right, but that's not insignificant, right? But even leaving that aside, so like take Rage Against the Machine. I grew up, I'm a Gen Xer, right? And so like Rage Against the Machine, screw the system, don't participate in the system, right? Reject your parents' religion, reject your parents' lifestyle, right? Which basically left, like, what happened to all of them? They just got filthy, stinking rich and bought Amazon product, right? I mean, like that's my generation. Do you see what I'm saying? Like we came up listening to Pearl Jam and Rage Against the Machine, but what did we do? We just fell into the machine, right? And bought a bunch of Amazon product and made Jeff, made Bezos a billionaire, right?
Yeah, the machine.
So really,
all of it in, right?
Yeah. So what happened there is we were just simply alienated from the institutions that gave our lives significance and meaning outside of the consumer paradigm, right? Like, so Raging Against the Machine, in the sense of rejecting all mediated institutions, doesn't liberate us from the machine. It just puts us in its clutches, rather than the natural relationships that are made to make human life meaningful.
I used to believe a lot of embarrassing things, but I at least can proudly say that I think I always understood that Rage Against the Machine was just a band of nitwits from a very young age. So I'm proud of at least that much, even in my teenage years.
Yeah.
But like there's other bands, right? I remember the band Chumbawamba.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so these people are like hardcore, like Marcuseites for sure, right?
Yeah.
And like they got in a lot of, I guess, crap. It's funny how I know these Chumbawamba statistics with like that scene, simply because they accepted like their first record deal. Like this, this made them completely outcast to that sort of what's actually Rage Against the Machine type of culture in the music world, right? Like the fact that they got a record deal itself, that was it. They were no longer there. You are the machine now, right?
Like we've said, the revolution will not be televised. If it's on TV, right, it's not the revolution. It's now become consumer identity, right?
Yeah.
And I think I can't emphasize this enough, right? That what like Marcuse, I think, is right, that we are being, in a way, there's a constant attempt to victimize us with this undermining of our rationality with regard to what our appetitive needs really are, right?
Yeah.
But the way you solve that is not to undermine the very structures that give us meaningful resistance to that attempt to undermine our rationality. Like there are certain structures, family, tradition, right? Creed, religion, all these things,
right?
That are the very, very rudiments of rationality for human beings, for the human animal, for the animal that is neither a beast nor a god on its own, right? Right? Or is either a beast or god on its own, right? And so I think this is the thing that like Marcuse doesn't get, and this is the thing why I think the wokesters out there, who may even be like authentically wanting this liberation and wanting to like push back against something that's really bad.
Yeah, I don't doubt sincerity. I don't doubt. Yeah, right.
But I don't think they understand that they are actually undermining themselves at every turn by trying to undermine every single mediating institution between the individual and the corporation.
Right. Yeah. And we just sent you the new op-ed piece on why classic rock now has to be toppled like statues.
Yes. Everything. Yeah.
It's all gotta go. Yeah.
Yeah. And so once it's all gone, what's going to be left? Like McDonald's, right? And Amazon.
A packet of Prime Matter. That's all that's left.
Yes, right? Exactly. Like, and go watch the 70s, environmental, sci-fi movie Soylent Green, right? And in the end, like the people are being fed this like corporate like magic food, and it turns out that it's actually human beings treated like prime matter, right? That's like, okay, now I'm not literally saying the corporation is making food out of human beings. My point, I think the point of the film is to say, indeed, what modern technological capitalism does is it treats us like we're prime matter. It wants to strip the individual down to this sort of lump of undifferentiated human goo that can then be manipulated into other identities that are like amenable to selling stuff too.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
Okay. Anything else you want to highlight from chapter 1? Yeah.
Okay. So that was one. So here's one reason why academia, though they would claim to be like Marcusites, are actually undermining the very thing that he has in mind, because he himself is undermining himself on this, right?
Yeah.
I think. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is he brings up in this chapter operationalism.
That's right.
And behaviorism in psychology. Okay. And basically what he has in mind there is,
and that's why, if people don't know, behaviorism has really fallen out of favor since then, but this was a very strong, probably mainstream theory at the time, right? Yeah.
But his critique of what's going on here would behaviorism just gets replaced by eliminative materialism in various versions of reductive materialism, right? And what he's talking about would apply just as well to those kinds of radical materialism as it would to the behaviorism of his day, right? And so it's interesting, a lot of those early like materialists, like behaviorist operationalists, like Carnap and all, they were all like complete left wingers too. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so what he's saying here is, when you have reduced human psychology simply to stimulus and response, whether it's on a behaviorist model or a functionalist model, right? That there isn't really an intrinsic reality to the human being outside of what we can get it to do, right? Whether that be like get it to do external behavior wise, or get it to do through a loop in the nervous system. When you reduce the human being to nothing but stimulus and response relations, then it is just ripe for picking.
Right. The human being is what the human body does.
What it does, yeah. And if we can figure out the laws of what it does, right, then boom, we can run that thing. We can run it like any other piece of technology, right? And so what he sees modern reductive materialism as is a technologization of the human being that is going to make, like, thinking of ourselves that way. And we always kind of live down to our expectations for ourselves, right? So by thinking of ourselves in reductively materialist terms, we'll live down to those expectations and be happy to be absorbed into the manipulative machine of techno-capitalism, right?
Right. Got it.
Yeah. Do you see? Exactly. Right. So the idea that we need, so here too, it's going to make the human being just to like prime matter, right? To be adjusted and controlled and cajoled into, like, making the clicks that the capitalists want us to make.
Right. Making the one-click buy.
Yeah. So I love it. It's sort of a left-wing critique of contemporary materialism.
Yeah. Right. Spot on. Okay.
Richard Dawkins, call your office, man.
Yeah. Good old Dawkins, man. He's a good example of what we were talking about before, of like, read the damn book and get the author right on their terms. And like the new atheists have caught a lot of heat recently in the past couple of years, but like they deserve it. Like Dawkins is a good example of what not to do. I mean, his incredibly trashy book, The God Delusion, is an incredibly good example of how to not be taken seriously by people you should want to take you seriously, right? I mean, take his stuff on the 5 ways, right? He mistakes them on every basic fundamental way. It is clear that he has never read the damn book. Now, look, the Summa is a big book, right? But he clearly didn't read the whole thing.
But he didn't even read the actual text of the book.
He didn't read the whole thing, right? So it's just like we're using him as an example of what not to do. So if we're going to engage something and we're going to critique something, you can't even really issue a real critique unless you've actually been able to say, I understand, right? So we're trying to understand what Marcuse is saying. Jim, you've been extremely helpful so far. We're through chapter 1 now. Should we take some questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Can
I tell you my favorite Richard Dawkins thing?
We can.
I think it's in the God Delusion, where he mentions that he went to a conference, philosophy religion conference, and they're talking about the ontological argument. He came up with his brilliant objections to the ontological argument, and they had to use S5 modal logic to try to show that I was wrong. Ha 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 ha. And I'm like, it's like saying I went to a calculus I went to a physics conference and I made an objection, and these physicists, they had to use calculus to refute me, right? So
Right,
it's like,
right.
it's the method of the field, son.
Yeah, the dude is an ass, right? So I mean, like, let's just go through it, right? So the reason I call it a terribly bad book is not because he isn't interesting. There's parts that are interesting, especially when he kind of sticks to his field. It is interesting, and his prose is certainly very funny at times, no doubt. But it fails utterly to establish his thesis and exposes him as just an absolute hack, right? So he confuses Aquinas's first way with an argument from like physical local motion rather than a metaphysical argument of the reduction of potency to act. He confuses the second way with the Kalam argument, which is something Aquinas explicitly rejects, right? You didn't read the damn book. He confuses the third way. Essentially, he doesn't even confuse with anything. He just says, well, why would you call a necessary being God? Well, turn the page, dude. Right? Turn the page. Like Aquinas tells you why. You didn't read the damn book. He confuses the fourth way with something about like quantitative magnitudes, which is completely irrelevant to transcendental perfections. Now, I'll give him a break on the fourth way. Fourth way is a little tricky for even professional philosophers, but still, didn't read the damn book. He confuses the fifth way for just a modern day argument from intelligent design rather than a deep metaphysical analysis of teleology. The dude has no idea what the hell he's talking about, right? At all. And then, he just goes off and he's just such a yapper, man. He's such an embarrassment. They had to use S5. I like that one. They had to use a well-developed system of a logic of possibility to refute me.
The very Cadillac method of the field they used to refute me.
Man. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Yeah.
One more footnote on Marcuse. And like so we kind of we emphasize the friend me, right? At this tonight. Okay.
Yeah.
But I want to get a sense like how deep the enemy thing goes on this, okay? Because in some of his other writings, I'm sure it's going to come up in later on in One Dimensional Man, but like other things, if you read it's a section of a big essay of his called The Biological Basis of Socialism. Okay. That's a scary one, man. Okay. Because he says, so our very biology is mediated to us by this external manipulation of our desires. Okay. Marketing. I'm like, yes, agreed. But then he says, like, we have to realize there is no fact of the matter of desire for biology. Right. And so the whole thing's got to be deconstructed. And by that, he means family, sexuality, sexual orientation, everything has to just be wiped clean so the individual can just sort of morph to whatever the individual wants. Right.
Yeah.
And so you can draw a straight line from that to what you're seeing today in a very, very own form. Right.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Great.
But I think the problem is the Marcuse in that moment and the people now today have no idea how they're feeding the very thing they're trying to destroy.
Yeah. Excellent point. Excellent point. Okay. I'm having a ton of fun with this series,
it's
man.
Fun, isn't it? Yeah,
this is a blast. And we get to tie it into some interesting contemporary
exactly.
issues as well, which is always good. All right, let's take some questions. I see some action in the comment section. So let us know what you guys are thinking. From Brendan here, he says, with Marcuse placing freedom from want as the principal freedom, so to divorce oneself from alien wants, it seems ultimately antisocial, which I don't know. Seems a bit ironic with socialism.
Yep.
And I was wondering what you thought about his idea that in creating a liberty-based society, we would have to ultimately undermine those principles given time, if I'm understanding that right. Yeah. So, Jim, what are your thoughts on all that?
100%, Brendan. I think that's exactly what we've been arguing here, right? Is this idea that freedom from want means divorcing yourself entirely, right, from any kind of given desire. This Kantian fantasy, right, is going to lead to a nightmare, right? And it's just going to further bind us to people who will provide for us desires if we don't actually think there are natural ones that we can look to, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm all for rejecting the bullshit manipulation of my sexual desires that come to me from the popular culture, right? But I'm going to reject that not by saying there's no fact of my sexuality. I'm going to reject that by having 6 children.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Well, you brought up this point before behind the scenes in the spicy backstage conversation.
Well, there it is.
Right? Yeah. Is that look, I mean, Catholics are kind of in sexual rebellion to the culture too. right?
We are. And we're saying we will not allow you to manipulate our sexual desires through the media.
And I'll show you my 40,000 children upstairs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know,
to prove the point.
I've got the grocery bill to show it, right? Right. But you know what I mean? Like, so we're like really what we're doing with something very much. We're saying we will not let you, the all these like various media things tell us what sexuality is and how we should fulfill it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we're not saying because it's just up to me what it is. Like, no, it's like there's some pretty clear biological parts telling me what it is.
There's a natural law, and there is, believe it or not, friends, some revelation to assist us as well. Right? Yeah.
Okay. You know what I mean? And so like, so I'm all for sexual rebellion, right? Okay. I just not, but rebellion for the sake of something, not for rebellion's sake.
Yeah.
Right? Which just becomes irrational.
Yeah. My like all-time life goal is to like have like 47 children, right? And then like go around talking about how I'm an expert in natural family planning. Like that always cracks me up. It's like, you're not an expert in anything, dude. You just had a ton of sex, right?
So Jen and I used to teach NFP, and we would joke because like almost every couple that like came through our class would like get knocked up the first year they were pregnant, first year they're married, and we're like, I don't know if that means we're the best or the worst NFP teachers, right?
right. Both.
Yeah, both. Right.
Oh man, this is funny. Catholic says, book hasn't come in the mail yet, but I'm reading Dostoevsky in the meantime. Sweet. By the way, you can get One Dimensional Man online free. Putting a link in the comments. Yeah.
Is it at Marxist.org?
Marcuse.org.
Marcuse.
So
see, I love the Marxist stuff because they do give their stuff away, right?
Yeah. So if you just follow that link I just put in, you can just read it online. And
who was the 60s radical who the title of his book was "Steal This Book"?
Yeah, who was that? I forget.
I can't remember who it was. Anyway, I love that, right? So like, like if you, no, gentle listener, don't steal the book, but if you stole the book, could Marcuse complain? Right? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Who was that? It wasn't a Lindsay.
Abby Hoffman.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it wasn't Lindsay. It was Hoffman. Yeah. Good. All right. Let's see what else we have here. We have a request. One day we should do the philosophy of Wall-E. Have you seen that movie, Jim?
I have not seen that movie.
I don't think I have, or if I did, it was on the background when my kids were watching it or something like that. So I don't really remember that one. But if you guys think that would be a good one for philosophical reflection, actually, here's the deal. Jim and I do want to do more commentary videos, but it's got to be like fun in a way that people send me like other people's philosophy YouTube channels all the time. I'm not going to do that. You got to send me like a Ted Nugent clip, or we did one of my favorite ones was on Jordan Peterson. That one was a really good one.
It was
like something that can really stir interesting philosophical reflection, either in a serious way or a funny way, but it's got to be different. It's got to be different in a sense. So yeah. And we'll give you a taste of that tomorrow when we go live with our buddy Ted Nugent. Wally was spot on. We got some cheers for Brandon in the comments.
Let's go, Brandon.
Good. Andrew highlights that humans are not wholes apart, but parts of a whole. Yeah,
right on, bro.
Yeah,
right on, Andrew.
Probably talk about that, right? Rational animal, yes, but rational, social, dependent animals. Yeah. Indeed. Right.
I wish I don't have it in front of me now, but I put a great line from Husserl on my Twitter yesterday to that effect, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things that I think all the people worth seeing, like reading, all agree on this. Whether it's Aristotle forward, right? That a man alone is a beast or a god, right? And I think that's what like Marcuse fundamentally misses, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of good comments here. I'm looking for some questions. If you guys have questions, point them out. Brendan says controversial Tom Morello comments. I mean, I guess I'm kind of a guitar snob, right? Because I grew up with all the 80 shredder virtuoso guys as my idol. So when I hear somebody that just hams on the wah pedal all day, I'm not that impressed. I'm really not, right? But I get it. Some they were a funky band. People. There's a few tunes I like of theirs. Don't get me wrong. And like I think I'm mature enough where I can say like, look, I disagree with like almost everything that these people stand for philosophically or politically. But this was still a good piece of art, right? Yeah. I can do that. I can make those distinctions. Movies or music or whatever. There's a lot of people that I disagree with on very fundamental levels, but they made a good piece of art for sure, right?
So one time, I came to this undergrad or grad school, and it was in my more liquor fueled days, and when I was still kind of some fairly radical politics, right? I remember being in downtown Boulder. It's a very supposedly liberal city, right? And
Mm-hmm.
as like a Midwest kid, right, I remember just being overwhelmed by what a great posing fest this was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and how like it was just clear these were like rich people, but all feigning this kind of like this is the 90s, it was like the era of the Che Guevara t-shirt, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I remember standing up at a bar and just screaming, "You're all a bunch of effing slaves. You'd eat shit if Eddie Vedder told you to," right? and someone said, "Hey man, I love Pearl Jam."
That's
great. Oh my gosh. And it revealed so much to me like what the radical academic left really was.
Hey man, I love Pearl Jam.
Right? Like they thought I was like praising them. Like, fools,
great
right?
response.
Fools.
That's
yeah,
fantastic. Yeah.
It's one of the high points of my life, by the way.
That it should be. Yes, man. Andrew says Charles Taylor was good on his critique of behaviorism.
Yes.
Behaviorism is still at work within developmental disability and child psychology. This is true, man. Like there's a lot of pernicious philosophical ideas that have still pervaded the a lot of the pseudo-scientific ideas that are still very prevalent in psychology. I have firsthand experience with it. No bueno.
No bueno, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I actually think you can read much of what Charles Taylor has done through his early work on behaviorism, because and consistent with what Marcuse is doing, also someone looking at it through Hegelian dialectics, right? There's a one of the most important moments in Hegel's phenomenology of spirit is his attack on phrenology, right? Which was sort of like the daffy reductive materialism of Hegel's day, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something like 20 journals dedicated to phrenology, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And much of like what's going on in the philosophy of mind in the phenomenology of spirit is that rejection of a kind of behavioristic approach to human nature, right?
Mm-hmm. And
what does Taylor do in his early work? He updates that and then goes on and like starts writing about Hegel and eventually his whole corpus of work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually think Andrew, you're seeing Charles Taylor's overall project through a very good lens there. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And this is the importance of like, doing good philosophy, metaphysics, philosophical anthropology, because I'm willing to say that stuff does set constraints on scientific theories, right? It does. Yeah. And it should, right? Yeah. If there's a scientific theory that is like radically at odds with what we actually know about human nature, that should really cause us to be skeptical.
One should wonder. Yeah.
One should really wonder, right? And that it might actually be pernicious as well, for sure. And we know like psychology is like, this is where the replication crisis was first discovered, was in psychology, right? They look like there has been a tremendous amount of awful quote science that enjoyed huge expert consensus. If you denied it, you were a science denier. But this stuff was totally false, in some cases outright fraudulent. And this is like something that still hasn't been resolved fully, right? Mm-hmm.
My good wife wrote her dissertation on sexual harassment for an industrial organizational psychology program in the 1990s, right? So you can get a sense like that, like that's when like the PC thing was really getting whipped up, and like the level of pressure on that was incredible, like to come to the right answers and stuff like that. Yeah. Right. Yeah, no longer 100%. In the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The replication crisis is kind of like people seem to like kind of like forgot about this, but that was something that was never really taken care of too much.
I may be the co-author on a major call out on a similar issue that should be published soon. So yeah.
Oh, that'll be spicy and good. All right, lots of good comments here. I'm looking for.
By the way, on this bit about behaviorism and the hollowing out of psychological inquiry, in my ever like insistence on continuing to educate myself, right? I've taken this deep dive in Husserl lately. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I actually think Husserl's book, The Crisis of European Sciences, is, I shouldn't say it's this like forgotten gem, because people in the know really admire this book, right? But it's something that's not been on my radar enough. And I wish a lot of the philosophy of mind I'd had that book at my fingertips when I was doing it. Yeah. So I highly recommend to the listener, if they want to get into that issue, to check out Husserl's Crisis of European Sciences. Yeah.
Right. Gloff says, "LOL, ripping on Dawkins. I'm here for it." I mean, that's just easy material, man. Do that anytime.
I feel like we just like went to the pound and like beat up a dog, right?
I feel like I need to go get a shower.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. I don't feel good about this.
I'm not proud of that moment. Yeah. Somebody delete that. Somebody delete that minute and a half from this episode. Yeah.
We both kind of like got into it too,
Yeah, I felt a little too good about that. Yeah.
It's like the scene in Office Space where they start beating up the fax machine, right?
All right, good stuff, man. Loving this series, a lot of fun. Gentle listeners, hope you guys are getting something out of this. So please like, share, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned tomorrow. We're going to do our Freaky Friday. Jim, what time are we kicking that off tomorrow so the gentle listeners don't miss out on that?
I think to be safe, we should say 3, if that's
all
okay.
Right. Yeah, we're going to schedule it for 3. So we're going to bring up some clips of Ted Nugent. We're going to reflect a little bit on the philosophy. We're going to ask, is this a modern day Socrates? Who knows, right?
Who knows?
And and then we'll do some just our usual live Q&A, ask us anything
Goofy
type stuff. Goofy on Friday.
And as always, the revolution will not be televised.
That's right. So read chapter 2 in the meantime. We'll catch you next time.
That might be the motto of Philosophy for the People. The revolution will not be televised.
That's the t-shirt. It's coming.
T-shirt,
Peace. Yeah.